Oh, wow, that was crazy. All right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to this year's MLK Convocation here at Beloit College. My name is Ellis Lewis, and I'm class of 2020. I will be one of your MCs for today's event. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our second MC for today's event, Isabel Mendoza, class of 2022, oh my, and who will be giving opening remarks. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to all who have come out today for the 15th annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day Convocation. As most of us know, Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most influential figures in the civil rights movement. He focused primarily on the use of nonviolence in the fight against injustice. Change is not easy. As Martin Luther King Jr. stated, change does not roll on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. Each of us are capable of change. But in order to achieve that, we must utilize our minds, bodies, and spirits. All three are what make the work possible. It was these three elements that made the civil rights movement possible. We can make change happen, whether that be with standing up to injustices in our society or simply achieving New Year's resolutions. As long as we utilize our minds, bodies, and spirits, nothing can limit us. Now, I would like to introduce a musical performance by Beloit Turner Overdrive, also known as BTO, directed by Timothy Rosenthal of Beloit Turner Schools, performing Freedom and Up the Ladder. Thank you.
Up the ladder to turn rain on me, the storm I knew. I'ma walk, I'ma march on, making the white flag blue. But forgive me, I've been running blind and true. I'ma rain on, sweet love to the sweet I knew. I'm telling these tears gon' fall away, oh. May the last one burn in flame. Freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, cut me loose, hey. Freedom, freedom, where are you? 'Cause I need freedom too. I break chains all by myself. Let my freedom run in hell, hey. I'ma keep running 'cause a winner don't quit himself. I'ma wade through your waters till the tide don't move. I'ma ride through your borders, call me bulletproof. Lord, forgive me, I've been running, but I'm blind and true. I'ma wade through your shallow till the deep I knew. Until these tears gon' fall away, oh. May the last one burn in flame. Freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, come here loose, hey. Freedom, freedom, where are you? 'Cause I need freedom too. I break chains all by myself. Let my freedom run in hell, hey. I'ma keep running 'cause a winner don't quit himself.
10 Hail Marys and meditate for practice. Channel on the news tells me I'm moving backwards. 8 blocks left, death is around the corner. 7 misleading statements by my persona. 6 headlights waving in my direction. 5-0 asking me what's in my possession, yeah. I keep running, jumping the aqueducts, fire hydrants and hazardous smoke alarms on the back. But mama, don't cry for me, try for me, live for me, breathe for me, sick for me, honest to God. I could be more than I gotta be, stole from me, laugh at me, nation hypocrisy, called on me, draw me, it's wicked, you know that my spirit inspired me like, yeah. Open correctional gates in higher desert. Open the mind as we cast away oppression. Open the mind and watch our beliefs, and when they come in the psychic concrete, I'm paying for every read.
Freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, come here loose, hey. Freedom, freedom, where are you? 'Cause I need freedom too. I break chains all by myself and let my freedom run in hell, hey. I'ma keep running 'cause a winner don't quit himself.
Next, we will have a poetry reading from a 12th grade student from the school district of Beloit and LULAC youth member, Kaylyn Vences.
Hola a todos, bienvenidos. It's Kaylyn Vences. So today, we're going to be talking about Dr. King's legacy. I'm a member of LULAC, by the way, and LULAC at the high school, our purpose is to empower Latinos within the community by just giving them a purpose and ensuring that they remain civically engaged. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. King is, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at the times of challenge and controversy." Dr. King was a man who was never comfortable with the way society was, and for good reason. He wasn't comfortable with the ideology and legislation that told his kids that they would never be the equal of a white kid. And he wasn't comfortable with the policies that kept people from across the nation from advancing. And because of this discomfort, things began to change. People didn't start caring about the civil rights movement until it made them uncomfortable. When they were forced to see the extent of how truly ugly racism was, they were uncomfortable. Having to see black people left disfigured by the hatred within someone's heart made people uncomfortable. So when we think about today's political atmosphere, it's messy. And the question remains, what new challenges will America face as we move forward into the future? The biggest problem we face now is not honoring Dr. King's legacy. By becoming comfortable and complacent with the policies that still exist today, we're not really honoring Dr. King. So here's my take on the problems that we face today. Within all problems that plague our society, ignorance is at the root of it all. Ignorance allows individuals to remain complacent with their hateful ideology. Ignorance enables us to lock kids in cages under the name of policy. Ignorance transforms sexual assault into a bipartisan issue rather than a violation to our fundamental human rights. But above all, ignorance provides comfort. Comfort is the state of being where our nation cannot advance. America is not great and should never be great. Great is not a state, it is comfort. Great is something our nation should be perpetually striving for. As America advances, citizens will have the burden of reconstituting the boundaries that define our limitations as a society. Additionally, we will also face the challenge of combating ignorance with tolerance and just ideology. We, the people, will face the struggle of abolishing the parasites that live within our society and impede our growth. These parasites have clung to us since the founding of America. Racism, xenophobia, sexism, poverty, and ignorance are the parasites that remain through trivial policies and legislation that attempt to exploit citizens. Obliterating these useless ideologies that set us apart will be an obstacle we encounter in the future. In the recent years, our nation has been marked by a streak of intolerance, in specific an intolerance to discomfort. When tragedy strikes our nation, we mourn and move on. Discussions that are invoked regarding the incidents are often escalated to a point of unproductivity by both parties whom are rooted in their own convictions. Working through discomfort is where our progression will be made. We, the people, will have to develop compassion and tolerance so that we may not allow our anger to inhibit our development. It is essential that as a nation, we remain uncomfortable. These challenges that we face in the future will strengthen us as a nation and help us reach our idealistical goal of great. Thank you.
Towards the end. Good afternoon. How is everybody? Yeah, glad to be here. Yeah, my goodness, it is cold outside. Kaylyn, Vences, you are amazing. Beloit College's application deadline was 6 days ago. But I hereby, Kaylyn, grant you an extension. Long enough for you and I to talk about your college plans. I'm going to convince you that Beloit is a better option than, say, Harvard. Beloit Turner Overdrive, you were amazing. More often than not, our Martin Luther King Day Convocation falls on the first day of Beloit College's spring semester. Yes, formally, this is the start of the spring semester, not the winter semester. This is one such year. I look out at a room filled with all of you and I'm reminded how amazingly fortunate I am to be here with you at this college and in this community. This community and this college proudly share both a history and a name. It's a history that is intertwined, complicated, fraught, exemplary, and rich. It is one for which, as president of this college, I am exceedingly proud, really proud. I talk about it all the time. One of the best aspects of the college's long tradition of hosting our Martin Luther King Day Convocation is that the community and the college physically come together unlike any other day in the year. That is a big deal and a great thing. We do not do it often enough, but we're doing it now, and it is terrific. In every other year, my welcoming comments have centered on lessons learned from Reverend King. This year, the lesson I'm taking from Dr. King is not to take your home community for granted. At the Unity Breakfast this morning at the Eclipse Center, Beloit third grader and essay award winner Layla Rudolph reminded me that Dr. King once said, quote, "People fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other." Thank you, Layla, for your help. Every year at Beloit College's commencement, a senior is selected to present remarks to their classmates. As you can imagine, this is a very prestigious slot to own. This past May, Rebecca Evans played that role. As I look out among you, I see a healthy fraction of people nodding their heads in recognition of a familiar name. Rebecca came to Beloit College via this community. She grew up here in Beloit and graduated from our very own Rock County Christian School. Rebecca is just a recent example of the remarkably productive synergy between the city and the college. Roy Chapman Andrews, Velma Hamilton, Thomas Chamberlain, Grace Owsley, Nadir Carlson all followed this path. But particularly at our Martin Luther King Day Convocation, Rebecca comes to mind because for her, during her 4 years here, she was a key component to today. Many of you have come to this event year after year and know that we are always kicked off by some miraculous musical introduction. Today was a great example of just that. During her time at Beloit, Rebecca was the one to make that happen. We miss her, but Rebecca has now gone from a youth in this town to a graduate of Rock County Christian School to a graduate of Beloit College to a graduate student at DePaul University in Chicago, a budding rock star. In her commencement address, Rebecca talked about the secret sauce at Beloit College being the ways in which faculty, staff, and students challenged each other to challenge ourselves. The result were alumni who went on to live lives of purposeful consequence with stunning frequency, and she listed alumni like Roy Chapman Andrews and Velma Hamilton and Thomas Chamberlain and Grace Owsley and Nadir Carlson, and she added a glorious recent alumni and projected her success story. And here I quote, Rebecca Evans, future Academy Award winner, Golden Globe and SAG Award winner, philanthropist, innovator, businesswoman, and best-selling author. Beloit College graduate class of 2018. Rebecca specifically called out this community as having been formative to her rise to superstardom. Her schools, her parents, Reverend Danny and Joanne Evans, her teachers, her grandmother. It takes a village. This wonderful Beloit community, people in this room right now, no doubt among them, current students at Beloit Memorial and Turner and Rock Valley Christian who will become Beloit College graduates. Yes, I have not forgotten you, Kaylyn. And maybe give a commencement address upon their graduation, one that I can shamelessly crib from at a subsequent Martin Luther King Day Convocation. How fortunate we are to be together today in this community on Martin Luther King Day. Together again in the college's chapel, please join me in giving the Beloit community a great big hand. Besides welcoming all of you here today, I have a second job, which is introduce one of Wisconsin's 2 United States Senators, Tammy Baldwin. Tammy is, I am happy to say, an alumna of Beloit College. Although she did not attend the school for 4 years, while she did not take the path that Rebecca did, in 2013, Senator Baldwin accepted an honorary degree from the college after having delivered a wonderful commencement address, perhaps second only to Rebecca's. Besides being an alum of Beloit College, Senator Baldwin is a proud Wisconsinite from the get-go. Born in Madison, raised in Madison, after a poorly thought-out decision to get an undergraduate degree somewhere in Massachusetts, Tammy returned to Madison and the University of Wisconsin for her law degree. Her meteoric political career took her from the Dane County Board of Supervisors to the Wisconsin State Assembly to 7 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing a Wisconsin district that includes the one we are in right this very minute. And from there, elected to the United States Senate in 2012, and as we all know, re-elected this past November, while breaking barriers over and over again. Senator Baldwin's legislative record is rich, important, and centered on issues of human dignity and social justice. To this particular audience, it's worth knowing that she has a record of concern with access to college, while also recognizing the state's responsibility to support what are arguably America's most important and successful institutions. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podium United States Senator from Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin.
I love when you make an introduction. It's so fabulous. It's so enjoyable. It is so great to be back at Beloit College, and I want to thank President Bierman for giving me an opportunity to join all of you today. And I also want to welcome back all the students and faculty, staff members for this, your first day up and going for the spring semester. And I want to thank all of the leaders, political, faith, and otherwise, who gather here to work hard to make Beloit and its community a very special place. As we remember and honor the life and the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I can't tell you how excited and proud I am that I get to be here today joining our new Lieutenant Governor, Mandela Barnes. So I had the opportunity to travel to Beloit just a day or so before the November midterm elections. And we were in a yellow school bus. We had the chance to actually spend a lot of time traveling over and around much of the state. And yet I've known him for a while. And to see what an inspiring leader he is and has become, and how much he gives back to the community is amazing. I also think about having the honor of attending his inauguration on January 7th. And so the way the room was set up in the Capitol, I was behind him when he went to the podium to lift his hand and place his hand on the Bible and have his mother and father and Reverend Briscoe and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court swear him into office. And from that perspective, I didn't get to see as much of his expression or even his parents, who I know are very proud. But I got to look out over the hundreds and hundreds who had gathered in the Capitol and look at the faces of the audience. And it was a powerful moment to see what I already knew, but how powerful that moment is. To remind us of our progress as a state, as a nation, and yet to remind us how far we still have to go. It's why it's so important that we meet the challenge to move forward by working and marching together, working hand in hand to break down barriers, to bridge our divides, and to find common ground on which to stand. So let us today rededicate ourselves to writing a story of progress that creates a future that's driven by hope, a future where we dream big and we help lift others up to their own dreams. I really look forward to continuing our work together to do right by the memory of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his life's work. So let us answer his call today and every day. Let's make sure that all Americans have an equal opportunity to achieve their hopes and their dreams. Thank you.
Dr. King once said, an individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concern to the broader concern of all humanity. And our next speaker, Mandela Barnes, truly embodied this message. In 2012, Barnes was elected into the Wisconsin State Assembly, where he served 2 terms, and mind you, he was just 25 at the moment. And though young, he quickly became recognized as a leader among his fellow politicians through his progressive economic and gun legislations. And now today, he stands before you as Wisconsin's 45th and first African-American lieutenant governor, and only the 2nd African-American to hold office statewide. Everyone, please welcome Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes to the stage.
Thank you. Listen, hopefully I can do something to earn that round of applause in this speech. Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Even before traveling around on the campaign trail, obviously follow your path, your career. You've been an inspiration. And Tammy Baldwin is someone who's tearing down barriers. And I am proud to stand alongside her as she continues to break more and more barriers. As we break down barriers, it's the same way. We should be in the business of tearing down walls, not building them. Want to thank you also, Ellis, for the introduction. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you to the Beloit Turner Overdrive again. Beautiful performance. Kaylyn, wonderful job. How do we sign you up for school here? I'm doing you a solid. Also, thank you, President Bierman. Appreciate you having me. Thanks for the hospitality a little earlier. There was no wine involved. It was just coffee. And again, thank you all for being here. To the students, faculty, community members, it's such an important day as we commemorate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. The moment that we're in calls us to do so much more. The question is, where do we go from here? And the short answer is, we go far from here. In a state like Wisconsin, we have so many significant issues that we have to deal with, many that have been ignored for a very long time, many issues that have failed to be addressed because there have been voices of the most impacted who haven't always been at the table, who haven't always been invited and have ended up on the menu as a result. But we have to change that. That's the way we change our conversations about progress and what does it mean. One of my favorite King quotes is, to ignore evil is to become accomplice to it. And as there is so much evil in this world, the last thing we need to do is be accomplice to it. We have to fight it with every fiber of our being, with every bone in our body. But the only way that we can fight injustice and fight evil is if we do it together. So again, I'm so honored to stand in front of you today as the 45th Lieutenant Governor of the state of Wisconsin. As was stated in the introduction, first African-American to hold the office, second African-American elected statewide. But it's not about making history. It's about making a difference. It's about doing the work to positively impact somebody's life. It's about recognizing the plight of marginalized communities and saying, we're going to make a difference. Again, only work that we can all do together. So there are very few words to express my appreciation of this moment for the reason that I stand in front of you as I begin to give back to the state that has given me so much. The state that, despite some flaws, it's a state that I am proud to call home. Because we do have a rich tradition here in Wisconsin, and it is incumbent upon all of us to get back to that tradition. So exactly 2 weeks, as the senator mentioned, I stood before the state in the Capitol, in the rotunda, to take the oath of office, but we didn't look at it as just an oath of office. We looked at it as an oath of dedication for everybody, for all people, for everyone who calls this place home. And the gravity of that moment is not lost on me. It still weighs heavily as we have so much work to do to advance the theme of this day, which is manifesting the dreams of the movement. And I want people to realize that the manifestation is a journey, not a destination. And there are so many other people whose commitment and sacrifice made this moment possible. People like Val Phillips, 40 years ago. There's just not enough nice things I can say about Val Phillips, because I knew her personally. I considered her to be a friend. I considered her to be a mentor, someone who I was able to call for advice, someone who always told it like it was, and she always had a story. And I remember when I asked her, I said, well, Val, what was it like, being a black woman running for statewide office in the 70s? And she tapped me on my shoulder and said, Mandela, nobody knew I was black. Yeah, I mean, if you were to look at her stat sheet, she was the first black woman to graduate UW Law School, first black person and woman on the city council. If you read her bio, you just may not have put it together. And at that time, she didn't have her picture on any of her campaign literature. Interesting times we're in now. We're in 2000, last year was 2018, the age of social media. Besides, my name is Mandela, some things you just can't get around. But it is truly her wisdom, her advice, her sacrifice that made this moment possible 40 years later. And obviously people like Dr. King, for the reason that we're gathered here today, but his vision and nonviolent methods gave strength to people like Val Phillips, people like Lloyd Barbie, people like Father James Groppe, and many others who bound together to pass a citywide open housing ordinance in the city of Milwaukee following the enactment of the Civil Rights Act. Dr. King, in fact, sent these words in support via telegram. It's like a text message, kids. Just took a lot longer and there was more to decode. But he said that what you and your courageous associates are doing in Milwaukee will certainly serve as a kind of massive nonviolence that we need in this turbulent period. You are demonstrating that it is possible to be militant and powerful without destroying life or property. Please know that you have my support and my prayers. This was the type of multiracial, multi-ethnic, pluralist organizing put into action that worked, that we need today. And even long before the days of Dr. King, we had our hometown heroes in the state of Wisconsin. People like Ezekiel Gillespie. He had the audacity in 1865 to say, I'm going to go vote. It was a revolutionary act at the time. And you see, Gillespie was born a slave in Greene County, Tennessee. And as a young man, he purchased his own freedom. He traveled to Indiana, and eventually he made his way to Milwaukee, where he settled and worked as a grocer and as a railroad car porter. He became a leader in the black community, going from railroad car porter to operator of the local branch of the Underground Railroad. He was instrumental in starting the first African-American church in this state, and he also played a role in the Joshua Glover controversy. And I'll get to Joshua Glover a little bit later. But in 1865, at the insistence, we all got friends that egg us on, but I'll just say at the insistence of Sherman Booth, Ezekiel Gillespie walked into the polling location and said, I'm going to vote, as any American should have had the right to. He was obviously denied. But as I said earlier, Ezekiel Gillespie had a will. He intended to vote, and as a result of being denied the right to vote, he sued the Board of Elections. Not only did he sue the Board of Elections, his case went to the Supreme Court, and he won that case. The argument was based on an 1849 referendum where voters right here in the state of Wisconsin elected to grant suffrage to African-American males. They got it half right, but a victory nonetheless. But more than 150 years later, we still see voting rights and accessibility still under constant attack. Now back to the Joshua Glover portion of this story. He was a runaway slave from St. Louis, Missouri. And in 1852, Joshua Glover sought asylum. He sought asylum. History repeats itself. But he sought asylum right here in the state of Wisconsin, and he ended up moving to Racine. And 2 years later, his former slave owner somehow learned of his whereabouts, and he attempted to use the Fugitive Slave Act to take Joshua Glover back into custody and eventually to Missouri. So then Glover was arrested, and he was taken to jail in Milwaukee from Racine. But then there was a rescue mission led by the same Sherman Booth that insisted that Ezekiel Gillespie should try to vote. That rescue mission broke into the jail, and they rescued Glover, who then escaped to Canada via the Underground Railroad. Now this led to the federal government attempting to prosecute Booth, but instead what it did was galvanize the abolitionist movement in the state, and it eventually led to Wisconsin being the only state at the time to declare the Fugitive Slave Act unconstitutional. These are the roots that we have to get back to. In a time like this, when we see federal government run amok, where we see hate in high places. But this is the same movement that led the way for Dr. King, who himself spoke in Wisconsin a number of times. In his remarks at the Grand Avenue Congregational Church in Milwaukee in 1957, he exclaimed that we have come a long, long way. But like I said earlier, we have a long way to go. And that if democracy is to live, then segregation must die. More than 60 years later, these words still ring true as We strive for equity in a place, in a state that has not always kept up with its commitment. In a state where we still must deal with extreme racial imbalance, we have to not only change what is possible, but what's expected. Again, because above and beyond making history, we must all continue to strive to make a difference. Unfortunately, today we're home of some of the worst racial disparities in the entire country. We've been consistently ranked as the worst place to raise a black child. We see wealth gaps, not seen since the Great Depression, in schools with the highest rate of success, but that's juxtaposed with the exact opposite, depending on what community you're in, depending on what neighborhood you visit, depending on what zip code. So advancing racial equity and increasing opportunity for children, family, and communities is a priority for my office, and I'm proud to say that it's also a priority of the governor's office. And it's important that as our agenda takes shape, that special attention is given to communities of color. And we promise to lead with the goal of making the state a better place for everyone, a state where all can have a chance to get ahead in life. One group of people who've been marginalized, their success doesn't take away from anybody else. It makes us all better. There is growth in equity. There is no growth without equity. And so a particular area of interest that I intend to focus my office on, of Lieutenant Governor, is environmental justice. I'm committed to making us a more sustainable state and working to protect our natural resources that make Wisconsin so beautiful, and realizing that years of ignorance and denial of climate change is having a detrimental impact on our planet. And the impact of climate change is often felt 10 times worse in communities of color, whether it be the chemicals in the air we breathe in neighborhoods or lead-contaminated water in homes that children drink. No person's health and safety should bear the burden of people's ignorance and greed. Our youngest deserve the opportunity to do great things, and their health and their future shouldn't be jeopardized because some of our leaders lack the political will to protect and care for them. We can't achieve true social justice unless we have environmental justice, and we have Dr. King to thank for not only leading the civil rights movement, but planting the seeds of the environmental justice movement, which is a civil rights movement of today. In fact, no person in this state deserves to have their health disregarded. A top priority of the administration is to adopt policies that improve the health of every person in Wisconsin, regardless of race, zip code, income, or gender. As Dr. King once said, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and most inhumane. And while we see systemic barriers like racism and poverty, and how they've taken a toll on so many, it's time we do something about it for the health of everyone. We also have to take a particular interest and focus on the health of women in Wisconsin. Women of color don't always get the health care they deserve. Women in rural parts of the state lack access to maternal care. Where health care is accessible, it's not always affordable. And where it's affordable, it may not always be accessible. Some people think that we're just fine the way that we are. Some people think that we should roll back protections in health care even further. I can't think of anything more shameful than a government that does not care about the health and safety of its people. And while we have a lot of work to do in the healthcare field, we also have issues to address in education. But I'm hopeful that for once, voices and experiences of marginalized communities will be heard and reflected in the work done by the leaders of this state. The work done to improve our schools is a benefit for everyone. Another civil rights issue of our time, because too many people, too many of our children show up to our schools not prepared to learn. And poverty is the most significant roadblock that they face. It can be students who show up to school hungry, students who deal with homelessness. 1 out of 19 students in Milwaukee Public Schools is homeless. This could be health issues that go unaddressed, mental health, physical health. So if our students across the state can't show up to school on a level playing field, there's no way that the opportunity gaps that exist in education can be resolved in the classroom alone. We've seen lack of investment that's led to overcrowded classrooms. Our talented teachers, younger teachers, are leaving the profession at earlier rates and at alarming rates. If the kids can't learn, they can't grow. Neighborhoods deserve strong community schools because I, too, believe that our children should not be judged by the color of their skin, nor should they be withheld from the opportunity to succeed. And for those who go through our K-12 system, who eventually do graduate, there's still financial barriers that keep too many young minds from pursuing higher education. And it hinders the economic mobility of so many others who take on the risk of student debt. Think about how many teachers, doctors, lawyers, future politicians, the next president of the United States who may have had a chance to succeed but couldn't afford to go to college. Another shame of our nation. Another justice issue. Which brings me to the fact that since the turn of the century, here in Wisconsin, spending on incarceration started to outpace spending on the entire university system. Dr. King aspired for a world that was free of hate, free of injustice, and a world where every man, woman, and child could succeed. Unfortunately, we're still a ways away from achieving this goal, and it can only be achieved when we work to end the era of mass incarceration that ranks us as the #1 jailer of African American men in the country. We spend $1.5 billion every year to lock people up in this state. Many for nonviolent offenses or mental health issues. Many who could be better served in a treatment facility that would do better for that individual, that would help to make communities safer, that would help us all. It's money that could be invested in education, job training. And while I fortunately did not fall victim to this statistic, I still have had friends and family members and neighbors who've gone through our criminal justice system at one point or another. I remember when I was growing up, a guy named Dion, who was a friend of my dad's, and he would be around in the neighborhood a lot. I'd see him enough that I remember him now. I was like 4 years old. But one day Dion stopped showing up, and I asked my dad, I was like, whatever happened to Dion? He's like, oh, Dion went to go work for the state. I was like, oh, cool. Dion got a job. And later on in life, I asked my dad, I said, whatever happened to Dion in that job? He's like, Dion went to jail. That's what going to work for the state meant. And I think about, in my bio where it says I got elected to the assembly at age 25, which at that point was a cool thing. Now we elected somebody at age 19. Blew me out of the water. But that young man, at age 19, Kaylyn Haywood, young black man, city of Milwaukee, is changing the face. That election is changing the definition of what it means to go work for the state. Changing the expectation for young black men in the city of Milwaukee and in the state of Wisconsin. Again, changing not just what's possible, but not what's expected, but what's expected. Not just making history, but working to make a difference. And it's tough to think about so many who do go into our criminal justice system, that we end up in a vicious cycle where there are very few options when they return to society. And the enormous toll that it takes, both social and economic, is something that we intend to get to work on right away. All this brings me to my last point, which is the economy. You can look at the stock market and think that, oh, well, there was a record year last year. Everybody must be doing great, which we all know is not true. Far too many people have been left behind while being told that things have never been better. And things are going incredibly well for a select few, but there are still so many people among us who have not recovered from the recession 11 years ago. And I think about the same opportunity that existed for my grandfather after he moved to Milwaukee after serving in World War II, where he worked at A.O. Smith for almost 40 years. He retired comfortably. But that same shot at the middle class, that same shot at opportunity, that same economic mobility doesn't exist at the same rate for people in my age group. They like to call millennials lazy. You're not lazy, there's just very few opportunities for us. That's the real problem. And the minimum wage hasn't gone up in almost 10 years. People are working much more for much less just to get by. And Dr. King, he fought for the rights of working people to be justly compensated. The March on Washington was the march for jobs and for justice. Hardworking people should never have to struggle. So, for as long as people have been ignored, again, it's time that we make sure that the most impacted voices have a seat at the table. This is a crisis mode, even with the existence of this planet, and that's why we have to make clean air, safe drinking water a priority. The people who pollute and compromise our safety should have to pay for it or fix it. Access to quality and affordable health care should be a right to build a more healthy Wisconsin. We deserve strong schools that are fully funded and ready to prepare the next generation. Higher education shouldn't be exclusive only to people who can afford it. And again, we have to prioritize education over incarceration. We have to work to reduce the number of nonviolent offenders because the state of Wisconsin should be in the business of saving lives, not warehousing them. Our state and our country deserve an economy that works for all. That means, again, an increase in the minimum wage, equal pay for women, and paid time off so that you can take care of your family. It means that we have to work to transition our economy for the future, using the threat of climate change as an opportunity to create jobs to save the earth, meaning that we should be leaders in this country and establishing some sort of Green New Deal to put people to work, because that is the path forward for this nation. That is how we build a more equitable and sustainable Wisconsin. We deserve to be a leader once again. I believe that we can, but again, there's still so much work to be done here. And across other states, there is still healing and there is still growth that must happen because, unfortunately, America can still be a mob of high school students in red hats, inspired by what they see in the nation's highest office. And you think about the audacity of surrounding and taunting a Native American Vietnam War veteran. Nathan Phillips. We're going to say his name. Nathan Phillips, an American hero. The audacity of Channing built a wall in front of to a Native American Vietnam War veteran, that is convenient ignorance. Unfortunately, we can still be a nation that separates children at the border and puts them in cages, loses track of their families, and in rare but still too often cases, see children's lives lost in U.S. custody. And unfortunately, we can still be a nation with religious freedom enshrined in the Constitution, but still have a Muslim ban upheld by the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, we can still be a nation that will eat its own tail with a government shutdown over ignorant and racist border wall, an ineffective wall that only serves the goal of supremacy. We have government workers going without pay, standing in food lines, not knowing when the check will arrive. And it's a shame. But uncompensated work is what made America great in the first place, and that's why we were hesitant about making America great again. But Langston Hughes said, I say it plain, America was never America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be. I know that we can be a nation where we see the youth standing up to the gun violence that has plagued communities across the country. A generation of people ready to take on climate change that so many have ignored. We can be a nation that, despite the insistence on persecution of the other, We see Muslim teens who've taken to our national parks to clean up the mess that the shutdown left in its wake because they too are America. We can be a nation that, in spite of all things wrong, elected the most diverse Congress in this nation's history in November. The youngest Congress, a Congress that saw its first 2 Native American women serving, the first 2 Muslim women to serve in Congress, one of Palestinian descent and another a Somali refugee. They too are America. And yet I swear this oath, America will be. And while we have yet to manifest the dreams of the movement, we are mid-stride in the march for justice and for equality. We have a duty to speak out and a right to be heard. We are charged to rise up, to do better, to make better happen for the child, for the poor, for the hungry, for the immigrant, for the working man and woman, for the LGBTQIA community, for the Native American community, for the differently able community, for all those who left behind, for the America that we want to see and live in. So to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., in this new year, we must resolve to be involved. We must go forward in faith and in justice for a brighter tomorrow, for the future, for us all. America will be. Thank you so much.
All right. At this time, on behalf of Beloit College, we would like to present these plaques to show a token of our appreciation to those who have performed and spoken today. When your name is called, please come up to the podium. So let's begin with, let's see, Timothy Rosenthal. Miss Kaylyn Vences.
Tammy Baldwin. Mandela Barnes.